Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Bridget Smart, and today I'm joined with Dr. Bell, Mr. Good, and Mr. Thompson. Today we will be talking about the Red Scare. Now to you, Mr. Good.
Thanks, Miss Smart. The Red Scare was founded and led by Alexander Kerensky, who also created the Red Scare in 1917. Republican administrations pursued pro-business economic policies and isolation foreign policy. Kerensky took coalition with the government and Russia's engagement from the war. We are now going to Dr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Bell, and I'll be discussing the Russian Revolution. Caesar Nicholas II's poor decisions led to him losing all control over power. A new government was then put in place led by Alexander Kerensky. Kerensky offered Vladimir Lenin peace, land, and bread. This made Kerensky's army seem a lot weaker. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew Kerensky's power in November of 1917. The Bolsheviks made peace with Germany, but almost instantly civil war broke out. The Whites, who consisted of landowners, government officials, and Russian army leaders, showed resistance towards the Bolsheviks. Britain, France, Japan, and the US all backed the Whites. Lenin's Reds later became known as the Soviet Union. The Reds made communism the identity of Russia. The ideology of Russia was so hostile to the US's beliefs. Joseph Stalin took over after Lenin's death, and he used terror to force peasantry into Russia. This all resulted into one thing: famine. Now on to Mr. T.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Thank you. It is I, Aiden Thompson, or you can just call me Mr. Thompson or Mr. T. I don't care. I am here today on a very moony and October-like-ish night. Speaking of October, that is when the Palmer Raid started in 1919. The Palmer Raids were a series of raids, which was the beginning of the Red Scare, which is what our topic is on today. These raids were led by the U.S. Department of Justice and Woodrow Wilson. They were also with General Palmer, which is why they're called the Palmer Raids. Now, what they were against was Italians and Jews coming from other countries and taking the workplaces of American citizens. Now, in one of these raids, they were successful and arrested over 3,000 Jews and Italians and ended up sending them back to their countries. But the Labor Society was really ticked off by this, and they ended up getting really nasty with the United States Department of Justice. Speaking of, nasty, they sent bombs. This was truly the climax of the Red Scare, and it was the beginning of the Red Scare. Thank you. Now on to Bridget Smart.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Now, as we get closer to the end of the Red Scare, labor strikes of 1919 were definitely an event to remember. Workers all around the U.S. were going on labor strikes. Around 175 workers per month were going on labor strikes. Essentials like food and clothing were going up in price as well. In other news, Italian gunmen Sacco and Vanzetti were found guilty for the murder of a paymaster at a shoe factory in South Braintree, Massachusetts. Americans suspect that this unfair allegation has something to do with their race. After being found guilty, both men were sentenced to death by electric chair. Yikes. Well, that's all I have for you today, folks. Now back to you, Mr. Good.
Thanks, Miss Smart. I'm now going to talk about the Republican leadership that occurred during the Red Scare. Republican presidents at this time were Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. These Republican leaders agreed on basic policies and goals. They all favored business and sought social stability. Many of these leaders were in fact businessmen who believed social stability promoted economic growth. Now, I'm going to wrap up our news segment with our conclusion of the Red Scare. The Red Scare ended successfully due to it causing a domino effect across the states. The Red Scare was a wide-opening surprise to everyone since it started. The Red Scare made headlines in history due to it being a threat to the American lifestyle. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. This is Mr. Good signing out. Bye.